time, but like, I don't think most people know what evidence-based practice actually is, where it came from, or what the constituents of evidence-based practice are. I think most people just think it's just what is written in research papers.
Absolutely.
Particularly, as I said, like applied research papers.
Well, it's often too, like, this is where language is always important to consider, of going, well, is that evidence-based? And what they mean is there some high quality applied study to support that? And that actually isn't reflective of what evidence-based practice is.
Yeah. Well, we keep saying it's not this. Do you want to describe what it is for people?
Sure.
Or do you want me to describe what it is for people?
Well, I can start and you can add where you think is appropriate. But if you look at the original concept of evidence-based practice by Sackett, it's looking at research, clinical practice, and clinical experience, I should say, and then the patient values and expectations.
Yeah.
And we can further subdivide that because...
And when Sackett proposed, I think it was in the early 90s, and he's a physician from Canada, he highlighted the fact that they were equally weighted.
Yeah, it's important to highlight.
I think that's the biggest issue. It's like now, I think people say, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And like you learn about this maybe in one lecture in your medical course or dentistry or physio or osteo or whatever. But it's like it's 90 and then 5% for the clinical experience and, 90% for the research stuff, and then current body of evidence. And like, it's just not fair because it's not how it was proposed and it's not how it was intended to be utilized. But that's, I don't know, and I know I'm exaggerating, but I think that's kind of how people sometimes try and apply. They go, well, there's no evidence for that. Well, you can't, why are you doing that? Where did you get that from?
I think it's further exacerbated by, at conferences, even, like people who do podcasts in, say, sports medicine, high performance, they'll interview a researcher in a particular field.
Yeah, in the field, yeah.
And I'm not dismissing that researcher doesn't have knowledge. Clearly they do, and they have typically expertise in quite a refined field, and it's useful to be able to pick their brains. And it's useful to consider the research that they've done, whether it be applied primary or secondary research. The issue that comes with that, though, is thinking about, well, how do we apply that research to clinical practice? Because it isn't just simply a process of following the exact intervention from the study to real world.
Yeah.
And the other issue that can happen, you see a lot, is how much clinical experience does that researcher have? Because...
Well, like, it's interesting to say that, like, a book that I've just finished, which is on more sports psychology stuff, for anyone's interested. I quite enjoyed it. It was Elite Minds by Stan Beecham. But he asked a question about if you needed surgery, would you prefer the professor who has all the research background, has studied this type of intervention, this surgery, and his knowledge is based around all of the research they've done, the reading, the collaboration with other experts on that topic, on that surgery, but really doesn't perform surgery at all, never has, or the surgeon who's done hundreds of that operation at a high success rate, but doesn't read anything, and is too tired to do extra study when they get home because they're doing 10 surgeries plus a day. Like, which one would you choose? And it's pretty obvious that you choose the person with the surgical experience than the person who theoretically is more attuned to the research and the knowledge about that surgery, but really doesn't have the experience to carry it out.
Yeah. I think that's a good analogy. And it's very much highlighted too, because typically the amount of high quality applied studies looking at a particular intervention is pretty limited. And if you only follow what is the gold standard, you typically find that the outcomes you get are not always favorable. And I think you see that in the real world still, because we don't necessarily see zero hamstring injuries in elite sport, or no ACL injuries occurring. Now, we might see trends of improvement, which is good, but that's also a part of the process of thinking about how you update and change your thinking